Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this September 21st, 2021 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council. We are now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck?
Here.
Councilors Wendland?
Here.
Burdick?
Here.
Councilor Rapp is excused this evening. Councilor Mbu?
Here.
Mans?
Here.
And Wynn?
I'm here.
Everyone, let's please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so our first study session this afternoon is on the proposed community policing recommendations. We have a hybrid meeting going on here, so joining us via Zoom are our facilitators, Bill De La Cruz, Lillian Tsai, and Tara Cooper. Welcome to you all, and of course we have Charity Taylor sitting here with us in the room. Thank you all for being here, and I'll turn things over to Ms. Taylor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name is Charity Taylor, and I'm a management analyst in the City Manager's Office. I'm with the community policing facilitators this afternoon to discuss the proposed recommendations. But before we get to that, I wanted to just go ahead and talk about how we got to where we are right now. So as you know, one of the council goals for this year is to lead the community dialogue on policing and develop an action plan to address the findings of that dialogue. This led to an issue statement that would help to really guide that dialogue. And this was presented to council back in February of this year. And I want to just read it now just to ground us, remind us of what we were talking about as we were going throughout the community policing dialogue. The issue statement says, we will thoroughly evaluate our systems, structures, and so I'm gonna go back one. The City of Lake Oswego is committed to providing high quality services to every person in our community. As a local government that provides law enforcement services, we believe systemic racism needs to be evaluated in law enforcement nationwide, and we are part of that system. We are undertaking these community dialogues to identify ways to strengthen how our police department collaborates with all of the people in our community to provide public safety. We will thoroughly evaluate our systems, structures, policies, procedures, processes, and practices with the goal of building public trust and relationships, especially with the people in our community who have been marginalized. As part of that process, we will seek feedback from the community, police officers, and elected officials about their expectations for law enforcement in Lake Oswego. This feedback will enable us to strengthen our best practices and identify areas where we can adapt and improve. Our vision is of a police department that is committed to providing equitable enforcement and outcomes, and which does not make decisions based on a person's race, so that all people in Lake Oswego feel safe and welcome. So with this issue statement in mind, we created a 4-part community outreach process. And in this process, we led with race. And the reason why this is important is because in our issue statement that I just read, we talked about the impacts of systemic racism in law enforcement. And the best way to determine what those impacts are to talk to the folks who are impacted by racism in our community. So first off, we did the community kickoff, which was back in March. I know it's hard to remember, but back in March, we did do a community kickoff. And at that time, we led a discussion about what community policing looks like in Lake Oswego and how we can help fulfill the community's vision. This conversation was key because what it did was highlighted a couple areas where we needed to have further discussion. So that's actually what led to some of the council presentations that we had in May on hiring, recruitment, and training, and then also the conversation that we had about stops data and use of force. So that was a kickoff that definitely garnered additional discussion that needed to happen. Next, we had our police department focus groups, and this allowed us to deepen our understanding of policing from an internal perspective, and it provided insights about our ongoing efforts for implicit bias within the department, and also highlighting maybe any areas that we needed to adapt and improve, as our issue statement talked about. And of course, we went to our community so that the people who live, work, and visit Lake Oswego could share their thoughts and their experiences. And this included having some focus group sessions that were specific to the Black, Indigenous people of color in our community. And then lastly, we have our community wrap-up event, which will happen in October, and we'll discuss that a bit later in our presentation today. So as you know, in June, what we did is we compiled all the information from our surveys that are both from the community, and then our focus groups that were both internal and external. And we came up with some findings thanks to our facilitators, and they fell into the following 4 themes of communication and reporting, engagement between the community and LOPD, LOPD recruitment, retention, and development, and then also community outreach and community bias. And so with these findings and these themes, our facilitators came up with recommendations, and that's why we are here today. We want to get your feedback on these proposed recommendations because we want to know if there's anything that you would add, that you would subtract or modify. We really want to make sure that once we go to the community in October with these proposed recommendations, that they really do encapsulate your voice and what you would like to engage with the community about this topic of community policing. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to our facilitators to discuss the proposed recommendations. We'll start with Bill.
Great. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you from far away up here in Zoom land. Bill De La Cruz, and I'm here with my colleagues Lillian Tsai and Tara Cooper. And I'm actually going to share my screen to show you what we will be sharing with you this afternoon. One sec, let me get myself adjusted here. So what I'd like to start with is just to let you all know that the recommendations were determined in collaboration with us as facilitators, with Lake Oswego Police Department, city manager, city staff, and from the process, which was the focus groups, community dialogues, and the survey, that overall revealed a little bit of a disconnect between communities' perceptions and current day-to-day practices by the Lake Oswego Police Department. And this included some expectations of officers' duties, how they're trained, some lack of information that's communicated from the Lake Oswego Police Department. And focus groups were concerned about insufficient presence on social media for the Lake Oswego Police Department to share their stories. And so one of our overarching recommendations is that the Lake Oswego Police Department provide an annual report to council that includes more data such as what's listed here, and to develop and execute a communications plan that educates the community about crimes, positive outcomes, LOPD practices, open positions, activities, and anything else that they feel is really important for the community to hear. And I think overall, as you have all requested, this is meant to increase transparency and knowledge about LOPD's activities and their engagement with the community. And so this first recommendation is really wrapped into that, about providing an annual report to council that includes use of force data, stop data, crime rates and trends, complaints, department demographics, change in policies, practices, or laws, and develop and execute a communications plan that is integrated with the city's communication plan. So really thinking about how the communications that come out of the police department are also an integrated part in terms of messaging and outcomes and values and beliefs with the city's communication plan. And that educates the community about department practices, positions, activities, and share information about crime in Lake Oswego and stories of positive outcomes, because we were able to hear some of those stories. So everything that we heard wasn't about negative outcomes or things that people were having challenges with, but also many positive stories that we heard throughout this process. And the next one is really looking at police and community engagement recommendations. So furthering developing the community engagement activities by reassessing existing LOPD sponsored events to determine opportunities for engagement with diverse community members. So really looking at how we as a community increase the cultural diversity of activities so that there are things that are happening that engage different members of the community, so that the LOPD sponsored events can also engage people who wouldn't normally be a part of some of these activities. And then continuing to proactively seek community partnerships with local businesses, community-based organizations, Chamber of Commerce, organizations like that, many of which the city and the Lake Oswego Police Department already have, and also seeking other diverse partnerships. And then really creating a culturally responsive public engagement plan for the Lake Oswego Police Department leadership team. And so I'm going to invite Lillian to talk about this next slide.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you again. What I'm going to report on is based on the focus group interviews with the LOPD and also our community groups. We've found 3 areas that warranted more attention related to this third theme, which is related to recruitment, hiring, retention, and also development. First, we found that the department had not received any gender equity or microaggressions training, although the department does conduct tolerance training and also had conducted implicit bias training, but they did not have specific or a deeper dive in any area such as gender or race. Moreover, the police officers in focus groups who had participated in implicit bias trainings reported that the training did not necessarily lead to changes in practices or policies, as they were already interacting with the community in a manner that they believe did not or does not perpetuate bias. So therefore, it is our recommendation that LOPD design a broader, more strategic training plan that includes other DEI topics, such as cultural competency education about different BIPOC groups, such as APIs, Black African Americans, Latinx, Native Americans, and also gender equity and racial equity training along with microaggressions, especially as it relates to other groups who experience microaggressions. You could perhaps integrate microaggressions with part 2 of an implicit bias training, since microaggressions are often the result of somebody's implicit bias. For example, if I have an internalized bias against someone, say a woman or somebody with a disability, I might unintentionally or inadvertently dismiss their ideas, interrupt them frequently, and or not consider them as seriously for promotion. I've seen this play out way too often. Secondly, is female officers shared that they were perceived as less competent and less confident by their male colleagues, which might have impacted their ability to be promoted. There was also a desire to have more diversity at the department, especially with more BIPOC and women. And by the way, only 13% of Lake Oswego sworn officers are women versus 11% statewide. So a little bit better than the state. However, still below 20%. So therefore, as was stated in the issue statement, we recommend an evaluation of the policies, practices, procedures related to recruitment and hiring, retention, and also promotion of women and BIPOC at the department to see where the gaps or the barriers are. There are a lot more details in page 5 of the report. And lastly, on number 3, we heard from surveys and community member focus groups a need for variations in law enforcement responses to calls involving youth and also mental health incidents. We understand that everyone at LOPD does get ongoing baseline trainings on behavioral health and how to talk to, respond to, and or interview youth and folks with mental health challenges. However, the challenge, we believe, was more related to having enough resources to respond to calls involving youth and mental behavioral health challenges. Some detectives and SROs do have extra layers of training in some of these areas. However, they won't likely be the ones to show up at any of these calls. So this recommendation is more of an aspiration that's really dependent on availability of resources at the LOPD. And currently, from what we understand, outside of already having behavioral health specialists on board, LOPD may not have enough staffing to respond to these calls. So that's the end of my section, and I'm going to turn it over to Tara.
Thank you, Lillian. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone again. It's been a while since our last meeting. I'll be talking about the community outreach and opportunities for increasing awareness and reducing bias. One of the findings and one of the recommendations from the findings is a lot of what came up in terms of community outreach and reducing bias was very much in alignment with the recommendations from the DEI task force from a year ago. And so kind of our overarching or umbrella recommendation around that is to take the DEI task force recommendations, and as you continue to operationalize those recommendations, do so with an intentional law enforcement lens, because there's a lot of overlapping areas. For example, with outreach and strategizing, it's easy to get caught up in what may be going on nationally or in Portland or in other cities. And I think with the recommendations, one of the things that we found that would be the way to know that you're doing the right work with the right people is to contextualize it in the city. So both the police department as well as the city continuing to enhance and develop their relationships with agencies and community-based organizations that are working with community members within LO. And so focused on demographics such as women, BIPOC, people with disabilities, veterans, youth, LGBTQ+, and so forth. So really the recommendation is in these efforts, as we continue to grow and operationalize the DEI work, to make sure that we're working with our community-based organizations and including people in the city in the conversations. Another recommendation is continuing to develop strategies for ongoing community dialogues. And I think what's really important to emphasize about that is it's not just the police departments. This isn't just an opportunity for them, but really it's for agencies across the city. This is an opportunity to have as many feedback loops, get as much participation and build relationships across cities. Again, with this emphasis on diversity, getting as many voices and perspectives involved as possible. Lastly, and along those lines, continuing to foster partnerships with businesses and organizations that connect the city with underrepresented groups and communities. When we heard from folks in our focus groups about different calls and concerns about bias, we have to look at this larger than just the police department. Who's making the calls? Who are all the parties involved? And so how do we have strategies that include, again, as many voices and perspectives as possible, because the police department are responding to the calls that they're receiving. So as a community, we have to work together in these areas of approaching bias, raising awareness, and making sure that everyone is a part of the solution, just as they are a part of the community.
Great, thanks, Tara. And before I turn it back over to Ms. Charity, I just want to thank you, Mayor and City Council, for engaging with us on this process. As Charity said, it's been quite a journey, and I feel honored that you trusted us with facilitating this work and with collaboratively bringing it to this point. And we look forward to the conversation this evening and the next steps. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Charity.
And actually, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the mayor. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them now about the recommendations and your feedback as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, no one's in the queue yet, so I guess I'll lead it off. I just want to thank Tara, Lillian, Bill. Thank you all for your work. Thank you for being here tonight, working through this long process with us and with the community. And thanks to the city team also for working on this, and everyone in the community who participated in this process and helping us to helping to inform these recommendations that are before us tonight. I agree with everything that's laid forth in the report. I just have one thing to expand on and a couple things to comment on, and then maybe one thing to add. So the one thing to expand on would be the first recommendation around the communication. I think the communication, it was really at the crux of everything. And this year, 2021, the more information I've been able to learn from the chief and the captain and the officers has been invaluable and has really helped me as we've gone through this process to, and even as we contemplate resources needed for the department. It would have been very difficult to really come to any kind of decisions or thought without that hands-on information and data that they've been able to share and been able to learn. So in thinking about, an annual report, I mean, I think of the average, member of the city council, well, I don't know if average, but it's a 4-year term, right? So that's the city council receiving over the entire course of their term 4 reports. I think, well, what's really anyone going to do with, 4 reports over the course of a term? I mean, the first one you might have right when you get elected, and the last one you're going out the door, right? So I think to have, meaningful information that's going to be able to inform policy and to give one, to ensure, too, that just these recommendations that we're moving forward, that we're meeting our goals and objectives and following through with the implementation plan, which, of course, is going to be forthcoming. It's going to require more communication than 4 times a year. And specifically what that looks like, I don't know, but I don't think 4 is enough. And certainly in this first phase, I think it will be critical that we are communicating internally and also with the community on how we're doing with meeting these goals and how we're executing the implementation plan, how it's going. There has to be follow-up and getting feedback, especially on these recommendations that relate to the department internally, getting feedback on how those are going from the officers, and then sharing that information with the community, of course. I think that the more that there's a recommendation around, we heard from the community, and of course is resource-based, but being able to appropriately respond to the variety of calls. And as Councilor Mance and I affectionately refer to it, the department, we hope will be more than what we call the triple G, which is the gals and guys with guns. We want the department to, and this is why the information is so important and what resources they need to be a department that has the resources to respond to this variety. And it may be beyond our department. There's discussions with other cities. Our neighboring cities are facing these same issues, right? And facing the same resource challenges, and how do they respond to this variety of calls? So there's talks around that, cooperative arrangements around having those more behavioral health services and youth services that could be shared, and those could be part of that conversation as well. How do we work with others to all utilize limited resources to accomplish these goals? Well, that's my feedback. I'll leave it there, and I'll turn it over to Councilor Mance.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for the excellent report. I too agree with all that is stated. It is my goal in life to have communication and education and community integration between our first responders, our council, and the community at large. I really, really feel that this is policing and civic life going into the 21st to 30th century. I don't know how else to state it. My biggest concern, as with anything that I've done up here on the dais oftentimes, is resources and how much of what we're doing is going to be aspirational, how much will be phased in over time, what our metrics will be as far as data to see where we are in that, those tiers. Other than that, like I say, I agree with everything. If I had a magic wand, I would see it be implemented all immediately. So thank you. Thank you again for all that you've done.
Thank you. Councilor Booth?
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you. I think I am very glad to see my friend Bill there. I miss you, man. And I just, this is a very important debate, and I have my view of this. The police has a very difficult work to generally dealing with people that schools fail, that society fail, and most of the time they deal with the police as the last recourse, and that's when we have some outcomes. And it's very important to recognize that, and also to recognize that our police, sometimes they're not given all the tools, as we say, you know, when we talk about microaggression. Even I noticed something when they say create a culturally responsive public engagement. What does that mean? I mean, it's words, but we have to tell the police this is what it is. But because everybody's talking about cultural responsive pedagogy or anything, but it has to be materialized. And to be materialized, the police needs means. And if they don't have the means, they will have problems. And so when we are talking about policing, there should be also means, which at some point is a contradiction between improving policing in the 21st century and defunding the police. I mean, it's like some antinomic terms, because you need means to do that. The police means training. They need training big time in many ways, because they have, like I said, a very difficult work. It's like generally the terminal part of things, and their actions also can be terminal. So which means people we put in those situations have to be given means, and those means are, you know, money for training. They have to go everywhere. In my trip this summer, I met with multiple police forces to tell them about our Lake Oswego force. I gave them things. I have things I gave even the chief. And today when I was coming, I have this one. It's a police from Senegal who gave it to our police. They say, because I gave them our stuff. And we talk. All the police, what they tell you is sometimes the hard work they have to do, being police officers that are castigated by the whole entire thing. Oh, the cops, you know. But at the same time, when we bring solution, it's generally in a deficit view. Let's not give them this, but we recognize their problem in the police. How can we do it? To solve the problem is to work together and not see the police as an enemy, but as if we are sleeping, you go protest against the police, you come home, you find a break-in going on, who do you call? The people you are protesting against. So it's that view that we should have, and I continue to defend that. If you look at the things, our communities that look like me, they're the one that are not served very well by the police. Not because it's the fault, but it's not, those communities in general are not served by the whole society. It's not only the police. It's you go to Safeway, the treatment you might receive there is different from your white counterpart. And it's the same in one office of City Hall and of the police. Those, when we say then culturally relevant policing, it should be detailed. We just cannot give a report and tell the police, oh, you need to have culturally. We have to give example and give means, because words also cost money. You tell the police you have to recruit women, you have to recruit people of color, you have to recruit. That needs money, because you have to reach those communities. It's easier to reach certain communities than others. And I'm very proud to see that the last recruitment of the Lake Oswego police is a recruitment that shows some diversity, that show hope that we are going to the right direction. And that's it. You know, I'm really now I'm in a position like this, I'm not in a position of criticism, I'm on a constructive criticism. What can we do to change the situation in a positive way? Is out like pandering things, you guys, you use this. Let's give the means, let's support the police because they need some change. There are some big structural changes that we need in all our policing and the whole society. But Also, they need, they are people like us, they have families, they are going, taking risk. They go home, they can be killed. Like people say, oh, you kill it. They also have those situations. So that's I'm very happy about what we've been doing in Lagos. We're having a mental health specialist. That's what we've been talking about, recruiting more women and more people of color. It's coming. So we just continue the debate like this and ask the other thing that the mayor said, an annual report for me is it's like, I'd rather have a quarterly report. Not only what is negative, but the chief can come and say, hey folks, this quarter we really need one more police officer, or we need, it's not only telling us what is negative, but what is positive, what they're doing, because every time you don't hear about the police, they're doing a wonderful job, but people don't say it. If they do a bad job, everybody knows, but if they don't say anything about them, they're doing wonderful work, and we don't hear a lot about our police in a negative way. So I'd rather have a quarterly report that's presented to council so we know what is going on. We just cannot come and the news call you at your home and say, your police did this, and you don't have any response because you don't know. So I'd rather that we have more details of what's happening more often than a yearly report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Winland.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this. I think we figured out, we started this a year ago, July, I think. So we've been talking about this for quite some time, and two things that I walked away with that are the top level is that we had an engaged community. We also had an engaged police department in this process, and for that, I'm very thankful, and I'm also looking at it from the bigger picture, and that's you don't have that oftentimes in communities where you have that partnership of everybody wanted to come to the table and say, hey, how can we get better? What are we not doing, and how can we do something that will serve our community in a better way? And I applaud our entire police department that came forward and shared. I applaud our citizens that came forward and shared. And it got us down around a table and we talked. Now, sometimes it had to be on a Zoom call and sometimes it had to be with masks, but still we were able to communicate. And I think that is a reflection of Lake Oswego that is very positive. The second 30,000-foot level that I wanted to comment on is that in going through this whole process, I found personally that our police department is about 20 steps ahead of most communities in developing policies and so on, where it's a community service oriented police department and not a, what'd you call it, 3Gs or whatever mentality. And so thank you to the city and for the police department for working together to get us ahead, I think, of the curve. And so I'm not saying that we don't have opportunities. I think this report, and I just want to make a call out to Charity, who has done an exceptional job in all of this, and also to Bill and to Tara and to Lillian for helping guide us through this. But I know Charity was the quarterback on this, and you've done a fabulous job, and we appreciate everything you've done because you've been the glue that has kept us together. And in city talks, it's oftentimes like herding cats, and you do a very good job, so
Thank you,
well
Councilor
done.
Winland.
To Ms. Sen's comment about the new recruiting class, we were able to go to the swearing-in ceremony of our new police officers and community resource officers, and I have to tell you, that was exciting. Those were exciting times for Lake Oswego. They were a good bunch that of individuals that you could tell they already had a camaraderie, you might say, to work together and to serve our city. And so I'm really excited about that. I agree with Tara's assessment that a lot of the things in this report really have to do with every city employee and everybody that we have on staff to engage with the community and to be a what I would call an engaging, customer service oriented city. We're serving, all of us are serving the citizens of Lake Oswego, and I think when we have that as our primary concern, things will happen. And that means for everyone we serve. And Bill De La Cruz has taken us through a lot of training that we've gone through on bias training and the whole diversity question and subject, which has not been a relevant topic in Lake Oswego because we just haven't talked about things like that. Because unfortunately, we just were, I think, comfortable with what we were doing. And I think that's moved all of us 10 steps forward. Do we have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. And it's, I think training is key, and I support further training. And I really am impressed with the level of training that we've even had in the last 12 months to start us off. Counselors, boards and commissions, police department, city people, other departments, and I think that needs to continue on. And I do like the concept of having a statistics, and I would even say whether it's on a quarterly basis or whether it's on a dashboard that you could just call up certain statistics that we have for Lake Oswego on our dashboard. And I would include not just police stuff, but what we respond to with our fire department, that type of thing. People like to know what's going on, and I think that might be a possibility. But I would close in just saying that while I was scared of this process that we were going to go through because I thought it would reveal huge warts and huge issues that we have, we really came out with a very positive, collaborative report that says that we're heading in the right direction, that we have work to do, but I was very happy to know that we're doing a lot more in the right column than we are in the not right column. And for that, I'm very grateful for, and I think that's a reflection of the people that work in this city and our community. So this is a great step, great process. Thanks for all the consulting work that you guys have done and leading us through the hard conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Burdick.
Thank you, and I'll do my best not to repeat what my fellow counselors have said, because I definitely echo what they have stated. But I do want to say that I am so proud of our community and how we've had all different groups step up and participate in this process, because this is not easy and it puts people in a very vulnerable position. And I am so impressed that our police, our community members, our city staff, everyone sitting here has been willing to do that and put themselves out there to say, you know what, we can do better. We do have things we need to work on. And I agree with Councilor Wendland. We are, we're in a very good spot, but I'd also like to add, we still have so much we can do. And I really want to thank our facilitators and everyone who participated to help highlight where maybe we're doing better than we thought, but where can we continue to grow and how can we move forward and not take our foot off the accelerator. We've had an amazing year. I think we've accomplished quite a bit, but now it's kind of, what can we do with this? How can we really move forward to make positive change throughout our entire community, not just with the police, but city staff, with our businesses, with the individual members of our community? What can we do and how can we do this? So to Councilman Boop's point, we have these great recommendations, and I agree with these recommendations. I think they give us a good platform, but now we need to create goals. and say specifically, what can we do to address these recommendations? And then continually evaluate these goals and say, how are we doing? And address them and say, you know what, we might be going down a little bit of the wrong path. Maybe we would need to readjust because we might be learning new things. It might be new research that's out there. It might be changes within the community. Who knows? But we need to make sure that we're strategic, that we're fluid, that we're constantly assessing ourselves and just seeking that improvement. And I think if we do that, we're going to continue to do amazing things. And, you know, again, look at our different trainings and are they working? You know, what is our objective of the training? Because to me, it's not just to have training, but to have positive outcome from that training. So I don't want it to just be a check in the box of, oh, we did this. I want to really see our outcomes and where can we go. And, you know, again, continue moving forward and growing and putting ourselves out there and saying, yeah, we might be better than some other communities, but I want to be the leader. I want us to step up and say, you know what, we're going to be the city that people want to follow, that they say, this is a city that did it right. And also be willing to say when we screw up, and maybe not screw up might be too big of a word, but, you know, when do we maybe make those missteps, address them publicly, not brush them on the rug, say, hey, we did this, we tried it didn't work, let's shift. And I think we've set a really good stage to do that. So I'm just looking forward to what we can do in the future and how we can really make positive impacts and positive change for everybody, because I think we do live in a really amazing place. And again, I just want to do a special shout out to Charity. You rock, thank you so much, and to all of our facilitators, because we couldn't be here without you. This is such a difficult topic. It's hard to have conversations, but you all really helped, I think, give people a place where they felt comfortable and could share and to open up. So thank you so much for helping create that place for everybody. And let's just keep doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Nguyen.
Again, I just want to echo my colleagues' gratitude and thanks to Charity and to Mr. Taylor Cruz and Ms. Tsai and Ms. Cooper and the team in putting this report together. And I know that it was a lot of work, and I know there was a lot of participation amongst our community. And as it's been said, there was a lot of vulnerability, a lot of people being willing to speak out, and I know that's very uncomfortable for people. Certainly, we from this report and these recommendations, we've shown that the police department is doing a lot of great things, and the community supports that. But I also want to caution my colleagues too, is that although this is our first attempt into looking at this discussion, it is a difficult discussion, a difficult topic to address. But we also have to recognize too that those that showed up to the table, those that actually participated in the discussion this time around, you know, for those that did participate, there were many others that did not participate. So I want to remind my colleagues too, is that, you know, this is our opportunity to say that, hey, we're serious about this. And what are we going to do with this? And are we going to say that, hey, we did our, you know, we hired consultants, we spent a year to put this report together, found out, hey, you know, we're doing great, and we stop there. And I caution that we don't. That we continue to this dialogue should not be a singular, should be dialogues, that we continue to talk about this, because as we talk about it and as our community builds this trust that, hey, this is a safe place, that we can talk about this, that we're not going to be ridiculed or dismissed, then it encourages people to actually come to be able to talk more freely about it. And that's where I want us to be able to go in this eyes wide open, not think that because we did this report that, you know, that we have, everything's great and everything is happy land here in Lake Oswego, which for the most part it is. But I think that, again, we just got to caution, we got to keep our ears close to the ground and be able to provide that space for that dialogue that needs to continue. That's my comment on that. I guess I did have a question more in particular in the weeds. May not need to be answered right at this point, but So certainly we've had the privilege of having Ms. Taylor kind of spearhead, herd the cats on this project here. But as Councilor Burdick had said, now we have these recommendations, now we have goals. Who would be that person on the city side? Is that something that might be falling under our new equity manager? No?
No, so I think, and I know Ms. Taylor is going to cover this in a second, but I'll just do it. And I do want to spend a couple minutes deep diving with you guys about reporting. So, and I'll probably invite the chief to come up at some point to talk about sort of the limitations of a quarterly report. The idea is that we will go to the community to have the wrap-up dialogue, right? Because so the community can see the results of the input that they provided in the form of the recommendations. And then when we're done with that, we're going to actually hand this over to the police department and ask them to develop a very specific action plan to implement the recommendations. And part of the dialogue with the community, I believe in October, will be about what does the community see as their priorities for these recommendations. So just so that as we ask the police chief and his senior staff to develop the implementation plan, which will include timelines, and as Councilor Burdick says, some sense of outcome, and also a resource plan, because as Councilor Mukup said, some of these things actually require additional or at least adjusted resources. So you will get to see the actual action plan as a result of that. So I hope I got that right, and I hope that everyone's there. But really, ultimately, the department has to own the implementation of this. It can't sit in any other office and have us expect to have it make lasting change in the police department. And given their participation in the dialogue, I would say I think there's widespread support and acceptance of most of these recommendations.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, we'll turn it back over.
So let me ask, though, while you're here, Dale, would you mind coming up and talk? We did debate the frequency of reports to council, and so I think I'd like Dale to sort of talk just briefly about why we landed on annual, and then maybe we could talk about, I hear and understand the desire of the council to not wait for a year to find out that something's wrong, but I think our practice in general is that if something does happen that we feel is significant enough to warrant informing the council, we do that now. We don't actually wait for a quarterly report to do that later. So could you talk a little bit about why we picked annual?
Sure. Thank you, City Manager and Mayor and Council. Thank you for listening, and to our facilitators, thank you. We picked, and I never do anything briefly, you know that. The reason why we picked annual, quite frankly, is because it kind of coincides with all the other reports that we do. So for our accreditation, which is going to come up in a few weeks in front of you, we have to submit annual reports, and it just makes it easier to do it all at once. And some of these reports that were highlighted, like use of force and those different reports, we can do annually. It's somewhat time consuming, so it goes back to Councilor's comment about resources. I'm more than willing to come anytime you want and talk about anything you want. So it's not a matter of that, but I know how busy the council is generally on the agenda. So doing a quarterly would create another perhaps meeting that we would come to. Just sitting back there as we were kind of going through this, one of the ideas, and this would be on the action plan, one of the ideas that we actually thought about that we thought would be pretty easily done is to create a dashboard, much like our dashboard that we have in finance, and Megan and I were just talking about it, and we've kind of talked about it internally, how we would staff that and how that would happen. And we could do some of that. It wouldn't be everything that is on that list, but we could do some of that on a dashboard that we could upload monthly. So anybody in the city could go monthly, pull up the dashboard and say, oh, here's this, here's this. Now, again, it wouldn't be everything on that list, but we would pick and choose some things that would be fairly easy. So I think we could get there, but that's some of the things that as we go forward with the input from you that we heard today and the input from the community that we hear on the 20th of October, then perhaps our leadership team, along with the city manager and assistant city manager and Charity and the facilitators, we can sit down and make a pretty good, solid action plan to move forward.
Now, how do we see the reporting on the metrics of these goals themselves?
Well, I have a couple ideas, but I'll let you go. Well, I think as we sit down and do, and I think the first thing that we have to do is figure out exactly what our action plan is on those. And then once we have those action plans and goals, it's going to be very easy to find the matrix. For example, one of the things that we're working towards right now, just going, and again, I'm kind of going off the top of my head here, but where we talk about calls to the people in mental health crisis and youth. Well, one of those is to obviously involve our new behavioral health specialists in a lot of those calls. So that's already halfway done, and we're moving towards that direction. And then she is actually turning around and providing, we've sent her to 2 specialized trainings since she's been here in April, that we were able to get her in to do critical incidents. So she's now going to be able to do all of our CIT classes for our department. And to kind of tag along with what you said, Mayor, we're actually going to use her and with some of our partners to teach them too, to help defray some of that cost. And so most of our staff will have some of that specialized training for that mental health person in crisis. And so some of those we can just be able to show you right off, well, this is where we're going, this is what we've done, this is the number of calls that she's handling now without really us being the lead on it. We might still be there, but she's the one that's actually taking those calls. So I think there's lots of ways. We'll just need some time to get in there and massage what those matrix look like at the end. And then quite frankly, some of them are easy. You're much like what we shared in the May meeting, you know, sometime in January, our vision was we're going to sit down and in 15 minutes or less in your January meeting, we'll have a use of force document that we'll share with you, and much like what we shared with you in that May meeting. And you'll be able to see our uses of force. And we'll share with you our complaint document, and we'll share with you our racial bias incident document, and we'll share with you all those documents that you'll be able to see and touch and feel, and that will be one of the things. And then you can ask questions. Oh, I see that this has gone up. Can you explain why? And so I think that's important. The one thing that I think will be a little bit harder is when we start talking about policies and procedures and laws that have changed, because those items change so quickly that it would be very difficult to keep track of those. But we'll find ways of coming around to doing that also.
Well, I think that I appreciate all that. I think that you all see, you are the boots on the ground in the community for everything, not just, crime statistics and whatnot, but like really everything because you see so much that goes on, and it is so helpful to know from you all, like what is going on the ground. And, the numbers is always half the story, right? If we all ran our businesses just looking at numbers, we'd be running it blind, because these are like people run businesses, and you're all people dealing with people. So knowing those, kind of having that narrative, knowing what is going on can really help us as we're looking at other larger issues around the houseless population, around behavioral health, other things that we advocate for in the city and beyond. And we hear so much of that from you all. And it's not necessarily crime related, it's just people related, and what our residents are experiencing. And we can realize too that there's more than one way to solve this. It's not everything. Obviously, we don't get all of our information at council meetings.
Well, and let me also say that as awesome as the police department is, and they are super awesome, they're not the only department in the city that also has a sense of what's going on. So I think if you talk to our parks maintenance workers or our parks recreation workers, our librarians, our public works employees, you get a different angle. So if what council's interested in is sort of more informal information about sort of what do our field staff tell us about what they're seeing in the community, let us talk that through. But I don't want to lay the entire burden of sort of knowing what's going on in town on the police department. I guess the thing I expected Dale to say that he didn't say, that in some cases of the things that we want to report to you, like use of force or complaints, the numbers are really small.
Right.
And so if we came to you quarterly, we'd be like, well, we had 3 complaints in the last 3 months. And I don't want to say that those 3 complaints might not be really useful and informative for council, but they're not going to show you trends. And so I think we're going to try to balance bringing you information about specific incidents, individual incidents, and what they tell us about what the department's doing, and then the overall trend that we're seeing. Because I think that's always the challenge, is that a lot of us generalize, we see one thing happen and we generalize that that must be the way everything is, and the reality is we need both angles, both the sort of the overall picture and also the stories that folks tell to inform how the department's actually doing. So that's, I expected him to say that, but he let me down. No, I'm kidding, Dale never lets me down, but I think that Dale, I know that when we talk, that's part of the challenge, particularly with use of force and complaints, is the numbers are not very large.
Well, I think you saw it just for the whole year. I think, and don't exactly quote me, but we had 74 incidences of use of force last year. And, so for quarterly, we might have 12. And, the same with the complaints are even smaller than that. So.
Well, and I'll, to my colleagues too, I mean, we're here asking, what the city's going to provide, but it's also what we're going to do too. It's on us to, spend that time down in LOCOM, to go on the ride-alongs, to spend face time with the chief, with the officers, really. And that's a huge thing that we can all do, and that they've been great to accommodate. Councilor Boop.
Yes, I think we should, if it's not the council, for example, the mayor has regular, maybe even weekly or monthly discussion with the chief and see what's going on. And if he feels that we need to know as a council, that we know, it's very important. I think it's like I didn't even have an update on the body cams. Is our police, are they wearing the body cams? And if not, when do we think we will have that?
So we're going through the procurement process right now. In fact, the person working on that just sent some stuff to Evan Boone, the assistant city attorney, to get stuff done. We've also applied for a grant that for the body cams. We have a roundabout figure of about $250,000 is what it's going to cost. But we're still going through the procurement process, and our goal is a little aggressive. We're hoping by January to have them purchased and ready to go. I'm not sure we're going to make that goal because of the procurement process, and I'm going to blame it on COVID too, because everything gets blamed on COVID. But every manufacturing has slowed to a trickle, and they're starting to get it going again. So, but yes, we're working towards that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we're all having a community meeting.
Yeah, so Charity, do you want to cover next steps on the project?
Yes, so next steps, first of all, thank you so much for your feedback. This is so helpful for us because we'll go into our community wrap-up event on October 20th. And as City Manager Bennett mentioned, we will be asking the community what their priorities are in terms of these recommendations, just so that we have a better sense of that going forward. We'll then finalize those recommendations and then also create that action plan, which will be, months in the making, just to make sure that we do have those details, as Councilman Boop said, what does culturally responsive mean, and just making sure that we do have those details and those goals and objectives together, as Councilor Verdict mentioned. So just wanted to give you that heads up if that's what will be happening next. So any other questions or comments before we head off?
Good.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. And we are going to transition to transportation funding options for pathway projects. I'm going to welcome Director Rooney to come forward. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Just give me a second here to organize.
Take your time.
Got my documents in case we have to refer to the details.
Turn that microphone off.
Okay, thanks. Great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Erica Rooney, City Engineer and Public Works Director. This afternoon, we are going to talk about the transportation funding options for pathway projects. The council report is, that was presented in your packet basically it's a high-level conversation about options. Oftentimes people say, well, what about this? Or what about this idea? Could we just do this? And so I wanted to set the groundwork for perhaps diving deeper on some of these things, but just to get the ideas out there on the table so you all could have a discussion about them, perhaps prioritize them for us, and then we could dive deeper on a few of them at the end of the day so that we can come back to you with some more information and what the ramifications would be. So I'm just going to do a very quick overview, similar to what was in the report, add a few things here and there perhaps, and then again, it's for our audience at home, but we can have that discussion as well. See if I do this the right way, it's been a while. There we go. So again, the background comes from our 2014 Transportation System Plan, which I forgot to put a very pretty picture of here. But anyway, the 2014 Transportation System Plan, or TSP, is where all of the transportation infrastructure projects are identified for the city. And it's based on a number of, well, it was based on a couple of years worth of effort, talking to the community, identifying gaps in our facilities, and then putting together a plan that included everything from signals to pathways to bikeways to some road widening projects, a myriad of things, well over 300 projects in total. And of those 300, the vast majority of needs identified in our transportation system plan are for pathways, and bicycle facilities too, but definitely pathways were the majority of needs identified. Then those projects are migrated, if you will, like all of our master plans are, they're migrated into the capital improvement plan, which is a part of our budgeting document. And there's over, like I said, over 200 pathway-related projects identified, well over $120 million worth of projects. That's probably low, but specifically, we do have $5 million worth of projects in the funded CIP for the next 6 years. The other part of the background here is, of course, council goals, which do change from time to time, and as the dais changes, so do the goals. But there's definitely been a trend over the last couple of years where pathways have become more and more of a priority. And as you'll recall, most recently in January, when you all were involved in that conversation, a specific council goal that was set was to increase funding for pedestrian facilities, beginning with the safe routes to school. And the background on that, of course, is that we spent a little bit of time before that identifying, I think it was 35 or 38 projects that were school-related. We prioritized those based on input from the Transportation Advisory Board, identified them in priority order, and the projects that we have specifically identified in the CIP are those projects. So let's get into the details again. And this is straight from basically the budget document. We'll show you the same numbers that what our resources are for the street fund. And this is a complex fund compared to some of the other infrastructure funds. So we get funding from basically 4 different sources. The street maintenance fee, which is shown on everybody's utility bill if they're within the city of Lake Oswego. So along with your water and sewer and storm, which is the smallest one, there's a street maintenance fee on there as well. And that's been in there for, let's see how many years now.
Almost
About
20.
16, 17 years.
Yeah.
Pardon?
No, good. No, you're right.
Yeah.
I was almost 20.
Yeah. That is the 6.2 million is what we garner every year, or excuse me, this is a biennium, pardon me, I forgot about that. This is a biennium budget. So 6.2 million over a 2-year period. The other sources are state shared revenues, often referred to as gas tax and DMV fees that are paid for by, and again, that's based off of population. The general fund transfer, we have a very generous general fund transfer. We're lucky to have that thanks to the council's priorities. And this year, it's this biennium, it's a little bit higher than it has been in the past. We've typically averaged about $3 million per year This last year, during the budgeting process, City Manager Bennett specifically proposed a $2 million one-time infusion to go to pathway projects, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's why it's at 8, but typically it's around 6. And then the more recent county, Clackamas County vehicle registration fee, which is new, and we are anticipating about $1 million per biennium for that. That, again, will be a fairly steady fee based similarly like the state shared revenue. Next is, where does the money get spent? The money gets spent on things like engineering staff, maintenance staff, materials and services and whatnot. But what I wanted to focus on in this conversation is, where do we spend our capital? And our capital right now is very simplistic. We spend it on either pavement work or on pedestrian pathway projects. ADA ramps are in there, that's small. We aren't doing bike lanes per se. We are doing signal work. Many of you might remember that we're doing a project out at Jean and Pilkington, but that is being paid for out of a separate fund, and so I'm not going to talk about that today. That's coming out of SDC's, System Development Charges. But if you were to look at our capital or our street fund budget right now, this is what you would see is about $9.5 million for street overlays and restoration, our big pavement management program that has been a council goal for many years. And then the $2.5 million for the next 2 years that is specifically identified for pathway projects. What we've done there is we've taken the top 5 school-related projects and combined them into one project package. We've already solicited for designers for that, and we're going to then be selecting them over the course of the next month. And by the 1st of 2022, we should have them on board designing a program for how to determine the best solutions in those 5 locations throughout the city. So it's a combination project. No two sidewalks are the same, and there's no such thing as a simple sidewalk project. So it's really 5 projects in one, but being managed by one consulting firm with staff. So we're looking forward to that. That should be, it's an efficient way to do it, we hope, and hopefully we can also put it out as one construction packet as well.
Ms. Rooney?
Yes.
Quick question.
Yes.
So the difference between the 21 million in resources and the 12 million in expenditures, the 9 million difference, what is
Great
that?
question, sorry. I glossed over that because I wasn't talking about the street fund in general, but those go to, again, staffing for both the engineering department and our public works department, those folks who work on streets. Also, everything from the electricity for the signals and the street lights, the beautification program, the pansies in the medians, tree removal in the medians, tree removal in the right-of-way, sidewalk repair, anything and everything, bollard replacement down here on First Avenue. I won't tell you how many of those get replaced every year, but it's a lot, and they're not cheap. Street sweeping's a part of it. I mean, anything that's on the road surface and above, signing, striping, electricity, like I mentioned, all of that comes out of the street fund. It's a very complex fund.
Yeah.
And so yes, that 9 million that you see between the two is the fact that it takes 9 million to operate and maintain what we already have.
Thank you.
Okay.
That 9 million is slim or doable or fat?
Depends on who you talk to.
Right.
I will tell you that from a maintenance standpoint, it's extremely conservative. We do not increase our maintenance budgets hardly at all over the last, if you were to look at a trend, you would not see much difference over 5-10 years ago. And we certainly haven't added any bodies, FTE, full-time equivalents. So there's never enough people to do all the work that we have. But I would say it's conservative. I wanted to actually take a moment to highlight this because it's good news. This is just a reminder that sidewalk projects are not simple. So how much money does it take? It's just a sidewalk, right? Well, there are no simple sidewalk projects left, especially with our limited infrastructure. The Noss Road project, which we're just wrapping up right now, finalizing the last bit of paperwork and shown in these pictures, was literally just, if you will, a pathway separated from the road. But it's complex because we're not merely adding sidewalk to the back of an existing curb line, of which there wasn't one. Well, we had to manage the stormwater, we had to move around trees, we didn't have adequate right-of-way, so we had to design to fit within existing right-of-way. So again, a little bit of a meandering pathway, if you will, wasn't simple. And then this project, as an example, is probably just shy of a half mile, and it was over $800,000 by the time we're done with it. And it's an asphalt pathway is the surface that the pedestrians will use. We've added some curbing here in certain places to manage the stormwater. But like so much of the city, we have a lot of, I refer to this often, rural infrastructure and urban densities and needs. And so it's hard to marry those two. Just putting in a sidewalk is not easy if you don't have a curb and gutter already there. And there's very few places that we have that. So I often say too, if it had been easy, we would have probably already done it from the sidewalk standpoint. You can even look back at places like McVeigh. 15, 20 years ago, we added shoulder 4 feet of asphalt and called it a pathway with a big white stripe between the edge of the road and the pedestrians. That's the best we could do because, again, it was a very rural road with no curb and gutter. And so that's kind of been our operations in the last 20 years, was to keep it fairly minimal. But that's the sort of projects we're headed into in the future as well, and more complex because of the fact that we're restricted in the right-of-way. So to address the specific goal for council, how do we move forward? Again, the council goal being increase funding options for pathway projects. So in the packet, we presented you with 5 different alternatives for consideration, again, at a very high level. The street maintenance fee increase, basically a change to people's utility bills. The general fund transfer increase, which is a discretionary choice by the council to make, maybe budget committee's discretion, but a council's ultimate decision on whether or not to increase the amount of general fund money coming into transportation. A general obligation bond, not bone, sorry about that. General obligation bond is an option that does affect property taxes. Local gas tax, often unpopular, but it's something that can be considered. Other cities in the area, there's small cities in the area have it. And that would take us quite a bit of effort to dive deep into how much that could garner for us. We don't have those numbers in this report here today, but it is an option to consider. And then lastly, just redistributing the current resources that we have. So again, looking back on that one sheet that said 12 million is the available capital, could you just change the percentages, do less paving, do more pathways? You could make those kind of choices. So to put it in simple terms, I just created this table to tell you where the impacts would be. So again, the street maintenance fee would impact the utility bill. General fund transfer increase would not have to increase anybody's property tax or other billings. It's just a matter of changing how you spend the rest of the general fund, be it on parks or the library or the ACC. Those kind of distributions could be made differently. General obligation bond, property tax effect, and local gas tax would hit the people who drive gas vehicles. And then redistribute current funds is again an area that wouldn't have a direct impact on either property owners or utility users or drivers. So that's really the summary of all of that. And I wanted us to have my goal is to get some feedback from you all as to what are the areas you want to pursue perhaps a little bit deeper, or if there's one that sticks out boldly, we can certainly do that. But I just thought we'd try to shoot for 2, keep it reasonable, and then we can dive deeper into those options. So I'm here for questions and conversation.
Well, I'm surprised you left off that bike toll on McVeigh. I thought for sure that'd get all those Hallinan, don't you think? You know?
Yeah.
Be very steep.
I was putting down reasonable requests.
That's right. About
Just have them go around and.
Just, art viewing toll.
Right.
That could work. That could
All
work.
right. Well, Council Manager, go first.
Thank you. I am kind of intrigued by the street maintenance fee. I never like increased fees. Now, being a person on a fixed income, I'm one of those who's going to come before council in 2 years and say no more fees. But that seems to be less of a hit. More, how would you put it? The cash flow aspect of it is better. It's more sustainable over time and is an amount of money that most people, and there will be those people, I don't want to discount that, will accept, maybe grudgingly, but it's certainly more acceptable. The problem for me with going up for GO bond is the amount of work that goes into that, the need for folks in the public who might have a specific job or project they want to see done, and all of that that goes along with it. In addition to which, there's always a conflict with the school district and their ability to float a bond while we're floating bonds and other things. I am still up in the air on the local gas tax. I'm jumping around a little bit here. I don't have a lot of data on that yet because we still need to work out in this state how we're going to equitably tax folks who don't use fossil fuel. I know there's things afoot. General transfer fund, that's always trade-offs. Someone else can speak to that. But I'm look at Councilor Wendland here. You know, there's some things always going to give on a general fund basis that is not going to be palatable to everyone, and it's going to take away from something. That, you know, and the redistribute funds is pretty much to me like a general fund transfer. It's just another way of saying it. You're going to end up in those same battles of unintended consequences. So those are my thoughts on it. I'm most interested at this moment in a street maintenance fee.
Okay. Thank you. I'll jump in just, you know, because I agree with Councilor Manns. I think the street maintenance fee as presented in the report seems to be the most secure and kind of clear way of funding this. And, you know, we all know the demands on the street fund as it is. I mean, we barely have enough just to do the maintenance of the streets. And I don't think any of us want to trade the streets, you know, for the pathways and have the streets degrade. So, you know, I'm all for being able to do, I think the community wants both. They want great streets and they want safe pathways. And as we see now with the kids and the school buses, you know, that we just don't even have that safe infrastructure for kids that even just live blocks away from the school. There's parents are still trying to put them on these buses, which of course aren't coming. It's just something that if we invest in now, I think the community decades, you know, from now is really going to be thanking us for it. The GO bond, I mean, same thing, as Councilor Mann said, local gas tax, I think we should be moving completely away from the gas tax. I certainly think we as a city need to be going that direction. And then, I mean, a street maintenance fee could always be combined if the resources, you know, were there, like we've done this year with, you know, where there was money to put towards pathways, but even if the workload, you know, could sustain it, I mean, that seems to be always, I mean, that's always an option, that the discretion of, you know, whoever's making the decisions. Those are my thoughts. So I also land with street maintenance fee kind of the top of the list there. Councilor Wynn, you're next.
Well, thank you. So I guess I did have so the question about street maintenance fee, though I know that in the report it's for, you know, a certain fee, like $9.95 per single family residence. But what about for like a multifamily? What about residents that live in an apartment complex or in other types of multifamily? And then yeah, I wanted to know about that, and also in terms of for the other types of, non-residential establishments? Is there a way that we can just make it more equitable? And the last thing to address those that are on fixed income too, if we do decide to adopt that, can we build in some sort of waiver program? Because I know that another $120 per year can be difficult for those that are on fixed income to be able to afford.
Thank you, Councilor Wynn.
I wasn't just.
If I could take just a minute to try and address the question of non-single family. So single family is the easiest, that's obvious, it's X amount per house. So that's relatively easy. The other facilities, be it multifamily or commercial, are based off of their square footage and their impacts. And so it's a set fee, but it's charged to the property owner, not, now, I don't know which each property owner does in an apartment, how they might assess that. It's probably in their rents. Could there be a trickle down? Yes. But a person in an apartment would not get a street maintenance fee bill. They don't get that.
Because they typically don't get an individual utility bill in the first place, right?
I won't say that they don't all, but typically they don't. There's lots of different ways you could restructure the existing code language regarding the street maintenance fee to incorporate some of those ideas that you talked about, either be they capping it, having waiver options. You could get as complex as you wanted. You could increase it in some categories and not in others, or not as much in others. A variety of different things could be done there. What we'd want to do, though, is each of those decisions has an impact on how much we would bring in. So I think in my simple example here, I said, for instance, if you wanted a 30% increase in the street maintenance fee, 30% increase would mean the monthly for a single family would be $12. I was just assuming a straight across the board 30% increase in order to get 30% more. So lots of different ways you could do it, but you'd want to run the calculations if you start changing the fee structure. Yeah, we certainly could do that.
Do we have an existing assistance program within the utility billing?
So we have a program where, and in fact, counselors who were on the council in 2020 will remember, we use St. Vincent de Paul. And if someone calls in, so we don't want to do income qualification here at the city. So we use a third party to administer our utility assistance program.
Okay. Something we could build on then, yeah.
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, city manager, but it's not very many that applied for it, even during COVID.
No, even during COVID, it's a relatively small percentage of our customers. And I think we even had a pretty significant increase during COVID, and it's still a really small percentage of our customers that qualify.
Right, okay. Councilor Boop?
Yeah, well, I think someone answered, Ms. Rooney, I think, answered my question about how much it would be. The thing is, we need, to fix the infrastructure in Lake Oswego. It's really dangerous at our limit, like we say. I mean, you go to Lakeview is one question. No kid like Bryant and Lakeview, it's a deadly place for children to bike. I live next to there. Even myself, when I run or I walk, it's very dangerous. And I mean, we cannot wait till something tragic happens to fix that. So, I defend your things. I mean, we need to get that money. So street fee is one way to go. The only thing is, it's better to have something consistent that when we leave, no one is gonna come and change it. Like, if it's something that we put and another council come and say, no, we're gonna take it off. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I know how we can.
You can't bind future councils. So I always tell councilors, don't think you can ever lock in what you do forever. It's just not a reality. You could, however, as part of your adoption, direct the portion of the increase towards pathway projects. That would at least be something that then you, as the current council, would manage. And if a future council wanted to change it, they'd have to go in and amend your ordinance. I mean, you could make it clear what your policy intentions are, and that's more likely to be sustainable over time.
Can we do that?
You can do that, but you can't prohibit any future council
No,
from
we
making
should do
a
that
change.
then, because I think that's, something that's consistent, that we have money. We need to solve this. Lake Oswego is a great city, great town we are all proud of, but, when you look at those, you just cringe and say, come on. I mean, even in rural area of some third world countries, you don't have. No, I'm being very honest. It's really like very backward. We have to change that. It's if it needs money, we got to do it. That's like utility bill is, something. I'm always against raising stuff on people, but if it comes to that, local gas tax is something, it takes taxes to make things happen, and we can do that, plus redistribute funds towards that. It has to be a goal that safe route to school is our children need to walk. We live in a country where obesity is something very big. There are studies that say 30 minutes exercise per day for a child can change a lot. If they walk from home to school, it's almost done, even if the school are not doing that. But in order for that to happen, it has to be safe. And our routes are not safe. The routes are not safe at all. So, yeah, I'm for it.
Okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Woodland?
So I'm going to take a little different tack. I agree with everybody. I think we're right on the same, but there's a couple things that I'm thinking of. One, on the CIP, there's some pretty large projects that are high-ticket items. And, I mean, we can save and save and save, and we won't ever, it may take us 10 years to save enough money to do some of those projects. Is there other funding anywhere that we would be eligible to fix some things, or is that just hope and aspiration and dreams that will never come true?
There's some funding. Some of those very big ticket projects actually are on the regional transportation plan. So don't quote me the dollar amount, but the pathway from Kerr and Country Club, Boone's Ferry, that whole big intersection, north on the backside of the high school, we all know about it, going up towards New Seasons and whatnot. That's been on the regional transportation plan for several years. That makes it eligible at some point, after it competes with everybody else in the region, to receive funding as those options become available. Those kind of projects are good to put on there, because then what we would have to do is a match. So let's say it's $15 million. Our match might need to be 150 or 3 million for it, or something like 20%. Could be an 80-20 split, could be a 90-10 split, depends. But those ones, we don't want to drop those, even though we might not get to them this year or next year. We want to keep them on there because they are still, they're considered regionally significant and someday could be a candidate, given the right, and the criteria changes all the time for different kinds of federal funding. And someday we will be at the right place at the right time. It's a school, it's next to a wetland, or a ravine, it's got high volumes, it's a regional connector, bingo. Maybe our ticket will come in and we'll be able to get that funded and just have to do a small amount of contribution in comparison.
Right.
So I don't want to take them off.
Oh, no,
But what we
I
do
would
is-
never take them off. No, I
Yeah.
just want to know if there's other funding sources. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, more
that's-
for the bigger ones, the smaller
Right.
ones, not so much. We don't,
Right.
honestly, we don't qualify for the current criteria associated with the state's Safe Routes to School program.
Okay, that's too bad. But, okay, here's the other thread that I want to go down. I think the utility tax is really the best bet. I'm not in support of the gas tax because I just think that's going to be a nightmare to even handle. And as we go through general fund issues, if for some reason we get a golden, egg that comes, we can make decisions on other priorities. I think one of the things that I go back to the general obligation bond, and this is kind of Lake Oswego has always supported things that they believe that will make a difference in their lives. They'll write a check if they can see a payback or an instant gratification or an improvement that they believe in. And so part of it is that you'd have to me, put together the pavement numbers as well as the pathway numbers so that we could get a total number to say, hey, we could really fix things for, if it's 20 million or 40 million, whatever it is, and this is what you're going to get, and it's going to be a direct payoff to these specific projects, and that's how I think you can sell a bond. The other thing to help, not that pavement, I will say there is sizzle in pavement. I have heard, I think of almost any project that we've had. I had more comments about First Edition and some of the pavement projects that we had. I mean, they really, it raised the level of happiness in our community. And I think the same can be said about pathways. And I would say that one of our goals was that we had the blue zone sort of goal. And I kind of look at this as selling sort of the sizzle in incorporating all aspects of Lake Oswego 3 years from now, or whenever you could get the momentum to do this, if you wanted to do a bond. But to say, hey, we really want to say, as a community, we want to support exercising, which I agree with my fellow counselor who knows all about running all over. Well, we have a couple of counselors that run. Daniel, I don't know about you, I don't.
I run from things.
You run from things, right? But there, I do believe that since we probably can't turn off the internet for our children or TikTok, we have to get somehow people involved in exercising, and that would be incorporate it with LO Reads, with a Blue Zone book, incorporate it with exercising, with all kinds of, sizzle around it. And then we could say, hey, if we invest $30 million and we sign on to being a Blue Zone city, these are some of the things that we would propose that we have to get done, including pathways that would help kids get to schools, but also people get to walk around and exercise. And I will say that I've seen more people stick with their walking routines since COVID happened. And I think there's some momentum and there's some possibility that, especially if we did it in a November or May timeframe where people are out and about in the spring and so on. But I think that's how you would sell a bond. Instead of just saying, we're going to add some pathways, would you support a bond? We have to have some sort of a global city effort to bring all kinds of things together and say, hey, this is a big step for us, and this is where we want to take it. And I think people would, it would be a call for, I would really like to bet if we had enough bond money to buy the railroad with the tracks going through LO, that may be enough sizzle that people would sign up for that one and vote. And make it into a rails to trail type thing. I think people could go for it. I don't think it could be done. It would be way too much money, but we can always dream, right? So I guess that would be my feedback, is that we would have to have a concentrated, bigger picture effort to say we're also going to increase paving to get us up to an index of 80 or 78 or something, and what some of those costs would be. And then we would be able to say that this is going to be a investment, but this is what you're going to get. And then I think people would would support it. So anyway, that's,
Thank you for bringing that up, may I? Councilor Wendland, I really like tying it in, if a bond is going to be floated at some point in time to the blue zone.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry, my mic. You can't hear me without my mic, my
On
goodness.
the TV.
I like tying it into the blue zone. Philosophy of being outdoors, Lake Oswego walks, Lake Oswego lives. And looking at future projects and coordinating with Director Rooney and others to find out what those projects are that would really provide the most value if a future GEO bond was floated. I do think that makes sense in the future, especially in between school bonds maybe or something. That could be done. But definitely blue zone or something, what's the word you're using, sizzle?
Sizzle, the fajita factory.
Yeah,
happiness.
yeah.
So we want to be happy.
Charge it up, you know? But thank you for bringing that up. It's a great perspective.
Councilor Burdick.
Thank you, and this shouldn't be long because I was right there with Councilor Wendland. I was very intrigued with the idea of the GEO bond, but again, I think it needs to be very specific. I think people need to understand what their outcomes will be, and we also need to tie it into the broader community and how it benefits us from like a blue city and so forth perspective. So I won't dwell on that, but thank you both, Councilor Wendland and Mans, for those great words. And I think amongst the others, I'd kind of look at the street maintenance fee. I would lean to looking at that. I think that gives some consistency through that, and I'm glad to hear that we do have some ways to help people who might need it as well, because we would hate to burden people unnecessarily. I agree with the mayor and about the local gas tax. I don't necessarily see that being the direction to go. And, again, in terms of general funds, it's always a give and take. And I think we do have a lot that we're trying to do as a city. So I think rely on that when we can, great. But I'm not sure, again, it's going to get a consistency. And when we have 120 million worth of projects that we want to do, I think we kind of need to go for some consistency and also bang for the buck. So I guess I am very intrigued with the GEO bond, but it's going to take some critical thinking and thought and strategy behind that.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like we have the top two. Yeah.
Right, I heard the street maintenance fee and the GEO bond, right?
Yeah.
And I would be supportive of more immediately on the street fund to at least get us started so that we'd have something to spend and get some momentum.
Right. And we're already kind of obligated on it through, this biennium. There's no more that we could.
With the street maintenance fee, we update those every year.
Oh, I mean with the, just with the projects we have in the pipeline on pathways.
Yes.
You're currently working on those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
With the 2 million.
Right, and it would take, even if the earliest you could probably increase the street maintenance fee would be not this January, but the next, because of the timing, unless you did something in between. But typically, we update all of our master fees and charges. So Sean, Director Cross will be here soon to talk about those in the next month and a half or so. And then we do those updates every year. And those fees go up a small percentage, usually CPI or the CCI, Construction Cost Index, one of the two. And we do those for January implementation on an annual basis. So I'm just thinking out loud here that it would probably be the following year, unless you wanted to implement something sooner for a street maintenance fee increase. But it depends on how much we'd want to modify the existing code.
So you need to tell us whether you want. Okay, I do like the fact that here, and I think you should be proud that we only increase fees once a year, so people don't have rolling fee increases.
Right.
So I do think if you want to do it in 2022, we need to know pretty much today. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll prep it for your consideration. And the other thing you could do is you can increase it any time and not have it go into effect.
Yes.
So for example, we could do the policy work in early 2022, but not have it go into effect until January of 2023. that would allow engineering staff to start actually doing engineering work on projects in advance. Because I think the other thing that Erica didn't say that she's always good at reminding me is that if we decide today we want to do a project, it'll be 18 to 24 months before we actually deliver the project, just because of how long it takes to do the engineering work and other required processes. So I guess after talking out loud, I guess I would recommend that we do that second piece, which is that we bring you the policy option for your consideration right after the first of the year, so that you can really have a process that allows the community to see what you're doing. And then that it would go into effect in January of 2023. How does that sound to all of you? Because otherwise I think we're going to be really stepping on the gas to get it done by January of next year.
Right. Well, no, I like that approach. I think it fits right with the timeline of how we're spending the current dollars we already have allocated. And, you know, just comparing the one thing I do like about the street maintenance fee versus the GO bond is that we can provide the assistance. You know, we just cannot provide assistance with a GO bond. Everyone's paying. And you know how that goes. And then we have the school bond and people are like, oh, the tax bill is getting pretty high. But our street maintenance fee is actually pretty low compared to other jurisdictions. So if it was different, if we were already really high and we were really pushing it, you know, over, but
I also think we
so.
can bring for you sort of separately a conversation about what kind of process if you want to consider a GO bond, because what the GO bond does is it allows you to accelerate capital projects. And I hear you on property tax bills, and certainly not wanting to continue to over rely on that source. But at the same time, I do think you could have a discussion about, is there a way to have a community conversation about a larger burst of capital projects that might really improve the situation more quickly, which is what the GO bond allows.
Kind of like a combined approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be something. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Councilor Mans.
Sorry, I have a question for Manager Bennett or Director Rooney, either way. 2023 is a budget year, correct? So, and 2022 is an election year with new councilors, starting in 2023. So if we were to do this in 2023, January 2023, would that council be able to lock something in for the next biennium? And this is just a thought, if they had a totally different idea of what they would like to see done, what would that do to the plan of pathways and trails?
Well, that's what I'm saying. When I said to Councilor Magrup, every council comes in, has the opportunity to do something different than the previous council that sat. So there's nothing that you all can do to lock in or guarantee.
No, I understand that.
And the council that exists in 2023 will be the one that approves the biennium budget. So, if we do it the way I've suggested, I think this particular council would act on master fees and charges in December of 2022, so the fee would go into effect. If a council came into office that disagreed with that decision, then obviously they could reduce the fee.
Sure.
And that's happened in the city's past before, that fees or charges have been reduced because a council didn't agree with it. That's what elections are for.
Absolutely, and I'm not negating that. I'm just trying to, if we're doing all of the work towards pathways and trails and putting forth this time and effort to somehow try to have a mechanism that we're ensuring as much as we can within limitations that these funds are used for that purpose, in the same way that we would with any other sort of funding, knowing the conditions could change.
Well, actually, that's another reason why I like the idea of doing a public engagement process, because I will say that's probably the strongest guarantee that you have that a future council will actually follow a plan, is that we do citizen engagement, we find out what the community really thinks, and then you reflect what the public opinion is in your action. That usually is a more sort of lasting, that outlasts all of us, right? If you engage the folks who live and work in the community and the council implements what they hear from those folks.
Are you referring to a geo bond? And then I'll stop.
I think
Or in
either
general?
way, I think if you're gonna increase the street maintenance fee for the specific purpose of building pathways, I think you ought to do a citizen engagement process around that to make sure that you're not out of step with what folks in the community want.
It's a good idea.
Got it.
And Councilor Wendland?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say that doing a geo bond locks you into the projects as well.
Right.
I mean, it kind of gives, so then you do have lasting effect. So that would be one way. And then while you're here, just in case you happen to know anything well, I know you know a lot of things about a lot of different subjects, but the topic of the day is North Shore Bridge, just so that we can get our wonderful people in with a follow-up question to say that, let's just say they find out that all we need to do is put some quickcrete on the side and it's a $20 project. If that money can be used, that $4 million, that could be used for other projects like pathways or pavement. So it's a two-part question. Give us an update.
Okay, so I'll give you the quick update. I believe we're inking contracts as we speak right now for what we did on that was a design-build kind of combination. So we have the designers and the contractor on board, well, as we're inking the contracts right now. They're gonna come in, do the analysis, determine what level of fix, what's critical, or what are our options, basically. Don't have those answers yet. That's all to start very, very soon because we're inking the contracts as we speak. Let's pretend it is the $20 concrete fix that you talked about. Then I believe we go back to the early September conversation we had with City Manager Bennett, which was, here's our ARPA funds. Let's set aside a bunch just in case the bridge issue is a big issue. And if it's not, we would reevaluate where to spend the difference. So if it comes in low, then we might have some of that and could redistribute differently. We'll have to have, I thought we said we'd come back if that happened.
Right.
So
But we're not under I mean, you're inking a contract just for an evaluation, and these people will not be, there's no incentive for them to say, replace the bridge so that they get more work.
We will have a report. It's a combination of a consulting firm and a contractor. So it has to be in concert with us. They can't just say, hey, yeah, we need to replace the bridge. Do you believe us? We would need to be fully informed of what the options are, what the risks are that they would be trying to mitigate. So there's no guarantee to the construction contractor that they'll get anything, because maybe it won't. Maybe it will be a bag of concrete. I don't think so, but
2 bags.
yes.
Right. Okay.
But there's no promise to them for anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they work together, but somewhat independently too. I mean, the contractor is not hired by the consultant. We've hired them separately to avoid that
Right.
particular.
And so the consultant is just to evaluate steps that we could do to secure safe passage on our roads.
What they're going to evaluate what's happened and what needs to be remedied.
Okay.
So we'll have probably a couple different alternatives to discuss, would be my guess. And then we make a deal with the contractor to pursue one of those alternatives.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's the short version. It'll be more complex than that conversation just was, but yeah.
And we're going to have a conversation on that soon, I think.
Well, we were going to come to you, we're debating that because you just heard the story. There's not much, I don't have any pretty pictures, I don't have any details to give you yet, we're inking the contract. So we'll be actually providing you with just a little bit more detailed update in a report format.
Gotcha. Is the contract coming before us, or is it just
No.
small? Oh, small.
No, that one's not yet.
You've got it,
Yep,
okay.
correct.
Great.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, council. This is kind of big news because we've been talking about pathways, other councils, many councils for a long time. We are now putting some actual dollars behind it. Things will actually get done. It's funny how that works. It's great. Thank
Very
you.
helpful, very helpful feedback.
Thank you for the report.
so much.
Yeah,
Very
thank you
good.
very much.
Thank you.
It's great. Thank you. Okay. All right. information from council. Councilor Wendland.
I just want to thank the city employees and our wonderful citizens for coming to the open house for City Hall. You guys did a fabulous job, and I have to say that it was, along with our mayor leading the whole emceeing and the remarks to having the Little League champions, they're champions in my book, come and do a ribbon cutting. And I have to say that there was a lot more people that showed up than I even imagined, and it was wonderful. And it was, besides having a view day of Mount Hood, that helped with perfect weather. But you just did, the whole staff, please relay my genuine thanks for.
I'll pass it on. It was great. Yeah, it was great. And I will also say on camera, just in case anybody watches this, that there were people who still wanted to take a tour long after we sent people home. If they really still want to take a tour of the building, they could just call the city manager's office and we'll try to set something up. We can't guarantee that we can do it for everybody, but we'll do our best for folks in the community who came and weren't able to see the building. So I want to thank all of you for being there. And also I want to thank the Millennium Dance Band. I don't think we did a great enough job. It was really, they were awesome. And yeah, and I also think Councilor Mahbub should dance with all toddlers in the entire community. He did a great job.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Just to talk about a couple regional things at MPAC, we had a discussion about implementation of House Bill 2003. So, we have the task force around 2001, and 2003 was kind of the accompanying bill, really looking at state goal 10, which is, the goal around housing. And the states really, through House Bill 2003, kind of rethinking goal 10. And we are working on this here within the city with DLCD. The gentleman from DLCD who spoke on it was great. Really talking about their how they're analyzing the methodology and how it advances goal 10. Again, the state is short a shocking number, 583,000 units of housing statewide. Huge. They estimate that at least 29% of those, they know 29% will of those units will require public support, and perhaps an additional 17 is likely to require public support. So different cities, around the in the metro area, sharing kind of what they're doing around housing. I mean, everyone's going through the same thing we are now with House Bill 2001, of course, but also implementation of the Metro Housing Bond and how that is going. They've been able to produce more units than expected, which is great. So lots of conversations around housing. But and specifically, the state's looking at how areas, really areas like Lake Oswego that are high opportunity areas, really under Goal 10, what's kind of borne out over time is that affordable housing gets placed in low areas of low opportunity. And Goal 10 just kind of reinforces that. And so Goal 10 has really allowed communities like ours to kind of escape our responsibilities to provide affordable housing. And we see that, right? Because we don't have any affordable housing units. Yet we comply with Goal 10. So that's, I think, what House Bill 2003 is going to address. And of course, we're also, addressing that as a group. And then in October, so we're going to have a meeting in October around support here. One of our meetings, we have invited Clackamas County, talk about the supportive housing services measure, also the implementation, the county's plan to implement the Metro Housing Bond, and we've invited other mayors from Clackamas cities to join us, and they will be joining us at the dais in some fashion. So just to let you all know, the format of that meeting will be a little bit different than our typical one. So thought a good opportunity. It's just a topic that really hasn't been discussed in Clackamas, so this is a good chance to get everyone into the room and work together cooperatively. And we all kind of have a lot of the same interests on these topics. And as we know that these problems don't stay within any particular jurisdiction, they cross over. So our problems are Westland's problems and our Milwaukee's, et cetera, all a little bit different, but underlying issues are definitely the same. So that's my update there. Okay. Anyone else? Ms. Bennett.
A couple things. First, I Thank you all for a really productive work session before the City Hall grand opening on economic development. If you haven't already, please take a look at my Friday email to you and send your rankings of economic activities to Director Scott Siegel. I'm sorry to nag you. Many of you know I don't like to nag, but we can't really take the next step until we hear back from you about what you think about the various activities. So should take you hopefully no more than 5 minutes to do it. And if you didn't get it, just send me a ping or catch me after the meeting and I'll send it to you again. Second thing, DEI Advisory Committee had their very first meeting last night. The mayor and I had a chance to be there and meet all of them. They just really had a meet and greet. As a staff person, I just want to say thank you because you guys appointed a fabulous committee. It's going to be a joy to work with them. And they got to meet Gillian Del Toro, who's our brand new equity program manager for the first time. I'll bring her to council as soon as, or ask Megan to bring her to council as soon as possible. And then hopefully you all had a chance to meet Amanda Watson, who's our new sustainability program manager, who started on Monday. So if you haven't done that, then she's probably gone home now, but, well, maybe not. Maybe stop by next time and we'll make sure you get a chance to introduce her. But I feel like we're getting staffed up on some really important council goals, and so looking forward to working with those folks. All right.
Councilwoman has a question.
So in answer to that, your survey question, I'd rank almost all of them equally. And so that's part of my problem is that I think you can't just pick one of them as being a priority because they all are encompassing, and it's just like paving and funding for things. There's a complex
I do think that's true, but I think we're going from a very little program, as Director Siegel mentioned, to trying to take steps in the right direction. So I think it's almost like we're going to ask the community on the community policing dialogues is what I maybe think of it as what would you do first, what would you do second, what would you do third?
Yeah. A ramp up.
And I think you heard that from the chamber as well, that there's some of the areas of programming that they think, for example, they talked a little bit about the need for incubation and the need to reinforce some of the existing businesses that are already here through directional signage and parking and some other things. And so I have a feeling that each one of you has a sense of those things too, of like what's the relative importance. Yes, it's true that a full program would have all of them, but what should we do first? What should we do second? What should we do third? Does that help?
Yeah,
okay.
That helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, great meeting. Under 2 hours by a minute. Look at that. Okay, we are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.